Become the person you were always meant to be, unapologetically. Stand tall, speak your truth, trust the discomfort. And remember, you are not hard to love. You are simply hard to manipulate. And that, my dear, is your greatest power. She began noticing it in the quiet moments, the way her body no longer tensed at the sound of his name, how her breath came easier, fuller, without the constant undercurrent of second-guessing. It wasn't a sudden shift, not some cinematic moment of closure, but a slow and steady thawing of all the ways she had frozen herself to fit someone else's comfort. And in that thaw, truth bloomed, not just about him, but about herself. She saw how many times she'd sacrificed clarity for connection, how often she had mistaken attention for affection, and how easily she had confused chaos with chemistry. Because when you're conditioned to equate intensity with intimacy, even pain starts to feel like love. That's what emotional manipulation does. It rewires your instincts, convinces you that turbulence is passion, and that peace is boring. But peace is not boring. Peace is sacred. Peace is what allows your nervous system to finally rest, your thoughts to settle, and your heart to stop bracing for impact. And now, standing on the other side of all those red flags she used to wave like trophies, she saw what real peace felt like. It was quiet, gentle, consistent. It didn't come with ultimatums or backhanded compliments. It didn't ask her to make herself smaller. It asked her to be. Just be, fully, unapologetically, tenderly, herself. That's when she realized something she wished she had known years earlier. Love is not proven through suffering. You do not have to endure emotional warfare to earn someone's presence. You do not have to accept half love in hopes it will one day become whole. And you certainly do not have to lose yourself to keep someone else. What she had experienced wasn't love, it was possession. Control dressed as care, domination disguised as desire. But no more. She was done carrying the weight of words that tried to shrink her. She was done misinterpreting pain as depth. And most of all, she was done seeing herself through the distorted lens of people who couldn't love her without first breaking her down. Her worth wasn't negotiable, her boundaries weren't optional, and her intuition wasn't a liability. It was a gift, one that she had finally learned to trust without apology. Because here's what she learned about manipulation. It doesn't always shout. Sometimes it whispers sweet nothings laced with subtle control. It compliments you with conditions. It asks you to compromise your voice so you can keep your place in their story. It tells you you're too emotional, too needy, too intense, when really, you're just whole. And being whole in a world that profits from your self-doubt is revolutionary. So she revolted, quietly, gracefully, with unwavering resolve. She didn't slam doors, she didn't scream. She simply stepped out of the story that was never written for her. She stopped trying to rewrite broken chapters and began writing new ones. Chapters filled with honesty and safety. Chapters where her no wasn't punished and her yes wasn't assumed. Chapters where communication wasn't a minefield and love didn't feel like a test. And as she wrote, she remembered who she was before the gaslighting, before the erosion of confidence, before the slow burn of becoming someone she didn't recognize. She remembered that her softness was not a flaw, her empathy was not a weakness, her dreams were not unrealistic, they were sacred. And any love that required her to bury those parts of herself was not love, it was a transaction. So now, she listened more, not to words but to energy, to how someone's presence made her feel when she left the room. Did she feel expanded or deflated, seen or observed, celebrated or managed? The answers came quickly now, because she had stopped ignoring her body's wisdom. Our bodies always know. Our hearts know. It's our conditioning that lies, that tells us to stay because he's trying, because he has a good heart, because it's not that bad. But not that bad is not good enough. It's not what you were born for. You were born for more than emotional scavenger hunts. You were born for more than mixed signals and breadcrumb affection. You were born to be loved in the fullness of your being. And anyone who cannot meet you there is not your home. So she built her own home. Brick by brick, boundary by boundary, and this time, the foundation was solid, built on self-respect, inner peace, and the quiet knowing that the right person would never ask her to be less. And if no one came, That was fine too, because loneliness in authenticity is infinitely better than connection through self-abandonment. She would rather dine alone in peace than feast in chaos. She would rather wait in stillness than rush towards someone who only loved her shadow. And that was the real shift. The moment she realized that love wasn't something to earn, it was something to receive. Freely, fully, without manipulation, without performance, without pain disguised as passion. And the more she lived in this truth, the less tolerance she had for anything less. Not because she was bitter, but because she was clear. Not because she was closed off, but because she was finally open to real love, to true connection, to being met with the same depth she had always offered. And in that openness, she blossomed. She blossomed not for someone else's gaze, not to be picked or praised or pursued, but because that's what flowers do when they finally have room, light, and peace. That was the most profound truth she had ever lived through. That healing isn't about becoming lovable to others. It's about realizing you were never unlovable to begin with. It's about remembering that the people who couldn't meet you where you were weren't proof that you were too much, too emotional, too demanding. They were simply not equipped to love you well. And that is not your fault. That was never your fault. So many women carry the burden of being too much for men who were never enough. They carry the weight of failed relationships like character flaws, when in reality, they were practicing radical bravery, offering deep connection in a world that teaches men to run from their own hearts. She had done that. She had loved bravely, deeply, sincerely. And now, she was choosing to love herself with the same devotion. That meant catching herself when she started to explain away red flags. That meant choosing solitude over confusion. That meant not mistaking emotional labor for connection, and not confusing availability with compatibility. Because she saw it now, how often she'd settled for potential instead of presence, how many times she'd waited for change instead of honoring reality. Love doesn't ask you to wait. Real love arrives ready. It doesn't come cloaked in ambiguity, wrapped in mixed signals, or laced with tests. It comes open, honest, safe. And perhaps the most healing realization of all was this: that even if she never found that love in another person, she had already found it in herself. She was the love she had been seeking. She was the safety she craved. She was the presence that never left. And that inner stability changed everything. It changed how she dated, how she communicated, how she showed up in rooms. She no longer molded herself to be more palatable. She no longer bent her truth to keep the peace. She no longer watered herself down to be digestible. If someone found her too much, they were simply not her people. If someone called her sensitive, she thanked them. It meant she was alive, attuned, awake. If someone dismissed her boundaries, she walked away, not in anger, but in reverence for her own worth. And this wasn't some hardened stance against love. It was the opposite. It was an open-hearted invitation to love that was real, that wasn't confused or conditional or manipulative. Love that didn't hide behind phrases like, "You're too sensitive," or "I'm just being honest," or "You've changed." Love that celebrated her evolution, that leaned in when things got deep, that made her feel more herself, not less. And because she now knew what manipulation sounded like, she could hear its echoes from miles away. She didn't need to wait for proof anymore. She trusted the feeling in her body when something wasn't right. She trusted the way her energy shifted after certain conversations. She trusted herself. And in that trust, she was free. She didn't need to decode mixed messages or justify neglect, or explain why she needed the bare minimum. She simply moved on, gracefully, powerfully, quietly. And that was the most poetic revenge. Not to become bitter, not to shout her worth from rooftops, but to live so fully in her truth that anyone who couldn't meet her there simply faded into irrelevance. Because when you live in alignment, manipulation loses its grip, guilt loses its grip, fear loses its grip, and freedom takes root. Freedom to feel, to choose, to walk away, to stay only where you are valued. And that freedom, that's where real love finds you. Not the kind that chips away at your self-esteem, not the kind that requires explanation, but the kind that meets you exactly where you are and says, "I see you, I get it, I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere." That's what she waited for now. Not perfect love, but honest love. Not fantasy, but grounded devotion. And she knew deep in her bones that if it never came, she would still be okay. More than okay, she would thrive. Because her life was no longer on hold for someone else to choose her. She had already chosen herself. And that kind of self-choosing changes everything. It ripples through your choices, your friendships, your career, your joy. It reclaims your time, your softness, your spark. And the people who come into your life from that space, they're different. They don't need to be taught how to treat you. They already do. They've done the work too. They speak your language, the language of respect, clarity, presence. And when they arrive, they don't feel like rescue missions. They feel like alignment, like a mirror, not a project, like an equal, not a fixer-upper. She smiled thinking about that, the way her future had opened up once she'd stopped waiting for someone else to give her permission to start. She was living now, fully, freely, fiercely. And from this place of power, peace, and protection, she finally understood what it meant to love without losing herself. And that, she whispered to herself, was worth everything.